The night they threw me out like yesterday's trash, rain soaking through my thin coat, Ruth's words carved into me like knives, "You can as well perish." They thought they'd buried me, but they didn't know whose name was on that winning ticket. That moment, alone, humiliated, was the spark. My revenge began not with anger, but with a quiet laugh in the dark. Newark, New Jersey, smelled of damp pavement and fried food from the bodega on the corner the night my life unraveled for the first time. I was 20, cradling a newborn who had no idea how fragile the world could be. Jude, the man I thought would be my forever, had already vanished 3 months into my pregnancy. He didn't even leave a goodbye note, just an empty closet and a voicemail stammering something about not being ready. Everyone said to abort. My sister cried, my mother yelled, my friends whispered behind my back. But when I felt Jackson's first kick, I knew he was my destiny. I swore then, no remarrying, no other children. If the world had given me only one chance at love, I would pour it all into my son. Money was a constant enemy. I sold second-hand clothes at a corner stall near Broad Street Station, hustling under umbrellas when it rained and shivering through snowstorms. Nights, I counted pennies in an old coffee can. More than once, I went to bed hungry so Jackson could have cereal for breakfast. But Jackson was brilliant, a spark of light in every dark corner of our lives. By 5th grade, teachers whispered about scholarships. By high school, he was winning science fairs and tutoring classmates for extra cash. His laughter was my fuel, his dreams my compass. The city around us wasn't gentle. Sirens wailed at night. The streets hummed with stories of people broken by bad luck or betrayal. But every time I looked at Jackson's determined face, I believed we'd outrun fate. When Jackson graduated from Rutgers University, he hugged me so tightly I felt years of struggle dissolve. "Mom," he said, his voice cracking, "everything I ever own will have your name on it." And he meant it. Every car, every bank account, every property, registered under my name. I kept working my stall even as Jackson's logistics business began to grow. It wasn't pride, exactly. It was survival, proof to the world that Grace wasn't a woman who quit. Then Ruth appeared. She was dazzling, smart, ambitious, and hungry in ways I couldn't fully read. Jackson met her in college. She came to my stall once or twice, her designer bag glinting under the dull fluorescent lights. She smiled too widely, her eyes darting over the cash box a little too long. I ignored the unease in my gut. After all, Jackson loved her. As they dated for years, 12, to be exact, I watched Ruth settle into our lives like a cat that owned the couch. She was affectionate to Jackson, polite to me, but behind her perfect lipstick, something sharp glimmered. Once, late at night, I overheard her on the phone. "He's obsessed with his mother," she whispered harshly. "Half of what he has isn't even his, it's under her name." The words pierced me, but I stayed silent. Love had blinded my son, and I wouldn't be the villain in his story. What Ruth didn't understand was simple. Loyalty runs deeper than bloodlines or paper. Jackson's trust in me wasn't a chain, it was gratitude forged through years of hunger and hard work. Years later, when a Powerball ticket would change everything, Ruth's greed would make her reckless. And my patience, my quiet, watching patience, would become her undoing. If this opening gripped you, imagine what comes next. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and drop a comment below. Your thoughts fuel the next twist in this unbelievable journey. The mornings in Newark were always the hardest. The wind from the Passaic River cut through my thin gloves as I set up the stall, arranging faded jeans and second-hand jackets on squeaky metal racks. My breath fogged the air while Jackson, still a boy, helped me carry boxes. "Someday, Mom," he'd say, his small voice echoing with certainty, "I'll make sure you never have to do this again." We lived in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment above a noisy laundromat. The smell of detergent and machine oil clung to everything, our clothes, our hair, even our food. Still, Jackson turned every corner of that apartment into a place of possibility. His bedroom walls were plastered with maps of the world, his desk covered in science fair ribbons. Every dollar I earned had a destination: his school supplies, his lunches, the occasional field trip he'd beg to join. Sometimes I'd go without new shoes or proper meals. It didn't matter. Each sacrifice felt like an investment in something brighter. By middle school, Jackson was tutoring classmates in math. By high school, he was winning robotics competitions. When scholarship offers arrived, I cried so hard I nearly ruined the letters with tears. College was a new battlefield. Tuition, books, and housing costs loomed over us like storm clouds. Jackson worked part-time jobs, and I took on extra hours at the store, even selling my late mother's jewelry to pay for his first semester. Through every hardship, Jackson's gratitude was unshakable. "I'm going to build something big, Mom," he said one night, staring at the ceiling of his dorm. "And when I do, it's all yours." True to his word, when his logistics startup took off, he registered every asset under my name. Trucks, warehouses, even the townhouse he eventually bought in Montclair, all carried my signature. Friends teased him. Ruth, who had been dating him since sophomore year, bit her tongue but didn't hide her frustration. Ruth was always there, at graduation parties, family dinners, holiday gatherings. At first, I believed she loved him for his kindness. But sometimes I caught a flicker of impatience in her eyes when Jackson mentioned my sacrifices. She'd smile politely but press her manicured nails into her palm when he called me the reason he'd made it. Still, Jackson adored her. He saw no cracks in her facade. When he proposed after 12 years together, he was glowing. "She's been by my side through everything," he told me. "She's the one, Mom." The wedding was small but elegant, held in a historic chapel in Princeton. Ruth wore a lace gown that shimmered like moonlight. As I watched them exchange vows, my chest tightened with pride and unease. I clapped and smiled, but deep down, a whisper warned me, some storms don't announce themselves until the sky breaks. Jackson's business thrived. The couple's life was comfortable. Dinners at trendy Manhattan restaurants, weekend trips to the Hamptons. Yet Jackson still visited me at my store, slipping cash into my pocket. For emergencies, he'd say, even when I protested. Ruth tolerated my presence, but her resentment grew. One evening, I overheard her murmuring to a friend. "It's ridiculous. Everything's under his mother's name. He's a grown man." Her voice was tight, brittle, and I knew then her ambitions extended beyond my son's heart. The Powerball craze swept through New Jersey months later. The jackpot climbed to $500 million, a sum so absurd the entire city buzzed with fantasies. Jackson stopped by my stall on a drizzly afternoon, a ticket in his hand. "Pick the numbers, Mom," he said, grinning like a boy again. I scribbled numbers that mattered to me: my birthday, Jackson's birth date, the day Jude left, and the years I'd struggled. Jackson chuckled, paid for the ticket, and, out of habit, put it under my name. That ticket, so ordinary, so small, would ignite the fire that consumed everything we thought was secure. Loving the tension building here? Subscribe, like, and leave a comment with your predictions, because the next chapters are where loyalty, greed, and betrayal collide. Ruth's arrival in Jackson's life was like the first crack in a dam, subtle but dangerous. She appeared during his sophomore year at Rutgers, dazzling in a red coat that made her stand out even on a crowded campus. She had the kind of presence that made people stop mid-conversation, the kind that whispered of ambition and hidden agendas. The first time I met her, she came to my stall on Broad Street. Jackson introduced her with glowing eyes. "Mom, this is Ruth." She smiled sweetly and complimented the faded scarves I was selling. But while she chatted about fashion trends, her gaze kept flicking to the cash box. It was quick, almost imperceptible, but I caught it. A knot tightened in my chest. At first, I dismissed it as paranoia. After all, who was I to judge? She was polite, charming, and seemed to love my son. But little things began to pile up. Ruth always suggested expensive restaurants for dates, even when Jackson was scraping by on part-time wages. She complained about her wealthy family's financial setbacks, in a way that sounded rehearsed. One winter evening, Jackson called me, voice trembling with excitement. "Mom, Ruth said she loves me." He was over the moon. I wanted to be happy for him, but a nagging voice in my head whispered, "She loves what you represent, not who you are." Years passed, and Ruth wove herself deeper into Jackson's world. She attended every graduation, every family dinner, every holiday. The two of them became inseparable. To outsiders, they looked like the perfect couple, college sweethearts who would conquer the world together. But there were cracks only a mother could see. I overheard her once at a Christmas party, speaking quietly on the phone in the hallway. "I just wish he'd grow up. It's like his mom is still the boss of him. Everything, is in her name. The words sliced through me. I stood frozen behind the wall, my hands trembling. That night, I stared at the ceiling for hours, wondering if my devotion to Jackson had painted a target on my back. Jackson, oblivious, trusted her completely. He bragged about her intelligence, her loyalty, her beauty. And Ruth played her part well, kissing his cheek, laughing at his jokes, pretending to admire the small townhouse he'd worked so hard to afford. By the time Jackson proposed after 12 years of dating, Ruth had perfected her performance. The engagement party sparkled with champagne and false smiles. Friends and family toasted their enduring love, but I couldn't shake the unease twisting in my gut. When Jackson asked me to bless their union, I hugged him and whispered, "I just want you to be happy." But inside, I wondered, would Ruth's hunger for more one day devour him? That question would answer itself soon enough, in the most devastating way imaginable. What do you think about Ruth so far? Drop your predictions in the comments, like, and subscribe to see how this storm unfolds. The wedding was elegant but intimate, held in a historic chapel in Princeton. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, casting rainbows on the pews. Ruth glided down the aisle in a lace gown that shimmered like spun sugar, her smile wide enough to fool anyone who didn't know better. I stood in the front row, clapping and smiling, but her knees gnawed at me. Jackson's vows were pure, his voice cracking with emotion. Ruth's, though beautifully written, felt rehearsed. When she slipped the ring onto his finger, her eyes flickered, not to Jackson's face, but to the guests watching. Afterward, at the reception, she floated between tables, charming everyone with practiced ease. When an old friend asked about Jackson's business, Ruth's answer was quick, "Oh, we're planning to grow it together." She emphasized together like a claim of ownership. Married life brought new pressures. Jackson's logistics company began to flourish, thanks to long hours and clever deals. Ruth enjoyed the rewards: weekend getaways, designer handbags, and fine dining in Manhattan. But beneath the surface, her resentment simmered. Every significant purchase, cars, properties, investments, was still under my name. One night, while clearing dinner plates at their Montclair townhouse, I overheard her whisper sharply, "It's embarrassing, Jackson. You're a grown man, and your mother's name is on everything. Do you know what people will think?" Jackson sighed. "She sacrificed everything for me, Ruth. This is how I thank her." Ruth rolled her eyes. "Or how you chain yourself to her." I didn't confront them. I knew better than to feed a fire I couldn't yet control. Ruth began planting seeds of discontent. She suggested relocating, California, maybe, where they could start fresh without the weight of old ties. Jackson resisted at first, but I saw doubt creeping in. Ruth was clever, relentless. Despite the tension, Jackson still visited my stall every Saturday, helping me rearrange racks and slipping money into my hand. But Ruth's appearances grew rarer. When she did come, her smile was brittle, her small talk strained. Friends admired their glamorous life, weekend trips to the Hamptons, rooftop dinners with city lights as a backdrop. But I saw the fractures. The marriage was a mask, polished and convincing, but masks crack under pressure. The Powerball jackpot's steady climb became dinner table chatter across the state. It was a fantasy, a shared dream whispered in corner stores and offices. No one knew yet how that dream would become our nightmare. Do you sense the tension building? Like, subscribe, and share your thoughts. Your guesses might just match the shocking turns ahead. The March evening was cold and wet, the kind of night when Newark streets glistened like black glass under the streetlights. Jackson stopped by my stall after work, rainwater dripping from his hair. He was grinning like a boy again, despite the long day. "Mom," he said, holding up a crumpled Powerball ticket, "pick the numbers. Your luck's better than mine." I laughed, shaking the rain off my gloves. "Luck? You call this luck?" Still, I took the stub and scribbled numbers that meant everything to me. 05, my birthday; 14, Jackson's birth date; 27, the day Jude abandoned us; 32, the years I'd worked this stall; 49, my age; and 10 as the Powerball, the number of times I'd almost given up but didn't. Jackson glanced at the ticket, then tucked it into his wallet. "Under your name, as always," he said, almost absent-mindedly. It was our routine, every major asset, every risk, always under my name. The next day, news stations buzzed. The jackpot had climbed to a staggering $500 million. It was all anyone could talk about: customers at my store, strangers on the subway, the cashier at the corner bodega. Ruth rolled her eyes at the hype but secretly Googled Powerball payout options. Saturday night, the three of us gathered in Jackson and Ruth's living room, the TV flickering with lottery numbers. Jackson opened a bottle of cheap champagne, just in case. Ruth sat on the edge of the couch, her hands clasped tightly. The announcer called the numbers one by one: 05, 14, 27, 32, 49, and Powerball 10. Silence filled the room. Jackson's jaw dropped. Ruth gasped. I stared at the ticket in my hand, my heart pounding like a drum. We won," Jackson whispered. Ruth shrieked, leaping to her feet. Jackson grabbed me and spun me around, laughter and disbelief mixing in the air. For a brief moment, we were united, three people on the cusp of unimaginable wealth. But as the excitement settled, I caught Ruth watching me, her expression shifting from joy to calculation. Her mind was already racing ahead: new houses, luxury cars, a life without the baggage of an aging mother-in-law. That night, while Jackson slept, Ruth searched her phone for Powerball claim process without original purchaser. She didn't know I was awake, watching her from the hallway. The winning ticket, so small and fragile, now held the power to destroy everything, or, eventually, to avenge every betrayal. Stunned by that win? Like, subscribe, and comment, because greed is about to turn celebration into chaos, and you won't want to miss the fallout. The living room still smelled faintly of cheap champagne and leftover pizza when I woke the next morning. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, illuminating the winning ticket on the coffee table like a holy relic. My heart skipped at the sight of it. $500 million, a number too big to fit in my imagination. Jackson stumbled in from the kitchen, his hair a mess, holding 2 mugs of coffee. He handed me one and grinned. "Can you believe it, Mom? We're rich." Ruth followed, her silk robe cinched tight, her smile stretched too wide. "We're not just rich," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. "We're untouchable." For a few hours, we laughed, dreamed, and sketched fantasies on napkins: vacation homes, charitable donations, maybe even a scholarship fund in my name. But beneath Ruth's laughter, I saw calculation. Every glance at the ticket was a silent measurement: how soon, how fast, how much. By afternoon, news outlets had confirmed the winning numbers, and the media frenzy began. Cameras swarmed the lottery headquarters. Reporters speculated about the mysterious winner from Essex County. Strangers at my store whispered theories about the lucky soul whose life had changed overnight. None of them knew that the ticket was tucked inside my Bible, safe between the pages of Psalms. Ruth wasted no time. She suggested quitting their jobs immediately and relocating, California or maybe even Europe. She painted pictures of sunlit vineyards and infinity pools. "We can leave Newark behind," she said. "Start fresh. No baggage." Her eyes flicked to me when she said it. Jackson hesitated. "What about Mom? She's the one who chose the numbers." She raised me. Ruth's smile didn't falter, but her voice sharpened. "She doesn't need to be involved in everything. We're the ones who'll build a life with this." That evening, while Jackson took a call from a lawyer, I walked into the kitchen to find Ruth typing furiously on her laptop. I caught a glimpse of the search bar: "Can a Powerball prize be claimed without the original purchaser?" She quickly closed the screen, her face flushing. The first crack had widened. Over the next week, calls poured in: financial advisors, distant relatives, old classmates, suddenly eager to reconnect. Jackson was overwhelmed but still warm-hearted, answering calls and making vague promises. Ruth, however, became territorial, screening calls and snapping at anyone who mentioned me. On Friday night, I overheard her on the phone: "If we handle this right, she won't see a dime." My hands shook as I folded laundry in the next room. I wanted to storm in, confront her, and expose her greed. But I held my tongue. I'd learned long ago that patience could be sharper than any blade. The following day, Ruth convinced Jackson to attend a private meeting with a financial consultant, without me. I pretended not to notice, but that night, I quietly visited a lawyer I trusted from church. We discussed the Powerball's legal requirements. His words steadied me. "Grace, if the ticket is in your name, they can't claim it without you. They'd have to go through hoops, and even then, you could contest it. Relief mixed with resolve. I realized then that the ticket wasn't just money, it was a shield, and eventually, it would be my sword. The media buzz intensified. A reporter even stopped by my stall, asking if I'd heard anything about the winner. I smiled and shook my head, my secret heavy but comforting. At dinner a few nights later, Ruth announced her plan to start house hunting in California. Jackson looked at her like she'd suggested abandoning a child. "We can't just leave, Ruth," he said. "We haven't even claimed the money." Her eyes flashed. "We will, without unnecessary complications." She glanced at me again, dismissive and cold. They thought they were plotting quietly. They thought I was naive. But I was watching, waiting, and remembering every slight. Revenge isn't loud, it's patient. The cracks are widening, can you feel it? Subscribe, like, and comment with your predictions. The storm is just getting started. By the time spring crept into Newark, Ruth had perfected her strategy. She didn't attack me outright, not yet. Instead, she began a slow erosion, a whisper campaign designed to chip away at Jackson's loyalty. It started subtly. She'd sigh when I called. She'd roll her eyes when Jackson mentioned my stall. "She worries too much," she'd say with a laugh. "She doesn't understand how the world works now." At first, Jackson defended me. "She raised me alone, Ruth. She understands plenty." But Ruth was clever. She shifted tactics, framing her manipulation as concern. "I just don't want you to be taken advantage of," she'd say softly, her fingers tracing circles on his arm. "People might pressure her, and it could hurt all of us." Soon, Jackson began to cancel our weekly dinners, blaming work. Then he started ignoring my calls. When I asked about the Powerball claim process, his tone grew clipped. "Ruth and I are handling it, Mom." The distance between us widened like a canyon. Neighbors noticed Ruth's new attitude, too. At a church bake sale, I overheard two women whispering. "She acts like she's already rich. She's trying to cut Grace out." Meanwhile, Ruth's preparations grew bolder. She visited a high-end realtor in Montclair, browsing multi-million-dollar homes. She discreetly met with a divorce attorney, just in case. And she spoke to financial advisors, pretending the ticket wasn't in my name. One night, I stopped by their townhouse unannounced, bringing Jackson's favorite chicken soup. Ruth opened the door, her expression hardening. "We're busy," she said flatly. I forced a smile. "It'll just take a minute." Jackson appeared behind her, his eyes darting nervously. "Mom, maybe another time." The door closed before I could reply. Alone on the porch, holding a pot of soup that was still warm, I felt the sting of betrayal bite deeper. But beneath the hurt, something fierce awoke. I began gathering my own allies, quietly. I reached out to my lawyer again. I spoke with a financial planner, explaining the situation without revealing names. I even contacted an old friend who worked for a local news station, planting the seeds of a story, just in case. Ruth didn't know I was preparing my own campaign. She thought her whispers were winning. Her arrogance grew. At brunch with friends, she bragged openly, "Jackson's mother is, well, let's just say she's not part of our future plans." A mutual friend relayed the comment to me. I nodded, hiding my fury. Jackson was changing, too. The once lovable boy who called me every day now seemed distant, distracted. Ruth's poison had worked its way in, but I could still see flickers of guilt in his eyes when we crossed paths. One Saturday, while I was closing up the store, he stopped by unexpectedly. He looked tired, almost regretful. "Mom," he said quietly, "Ruth thinks we should handle things differently now. She says people might complicate things." I looked at him steadily. "And what do you think, Jackson?" He hesitated, then mumbled, "I just want peace." I let him walk away without pressing further. Peace wasn't coming, not the kind Ruth imagined. Behind her polished smile and perfect Instagram posts, Ruth's greed was turning her reckless. She began calling lottery headquarters anonymously, asking questions she had no right to ask. She started making quiet inquiries about lawyers in California. But she underestimated me. I'd survived Jude's abandonment, decades of poverty, and the grinding humiliation of selling second-hand clothes. I wasn't about to be erased by my own son's wife. The whispers she spread would eventually become her own undoing. Because whispers can travel back to the one you betray, and when they do, they echo louder than a scream. The tension is boiling. What's your prediction for Grace's next move? Subscribe, like, and comment below to stay with this storm as it builds. Spring turned to a heavy New Jersey summer, the kind that makes the air stick to your skin. By then, the whispers Ruth had planted had done their work. Jackson wasn't cruel, he wasn't built for cruelty, but he'd become hesitant, easily swayed. He avoided my gaze when we crossed paths, as if ashamed of something he couldn't quite name. Ruth, however, had shed any pretense of subtlety. She strutted through Newark's upscale boutiques, flashing borrowed credit cards, leaving rumors behind like breadcrumbs. Her friends posted photos of her trying on designer heels with captions like, "Future billionaire vibes." One humid evening, Jackson called me. His voice was clipped, almost rehearsed. "Mom, Ruth and we've decided to move forward without you. We don't need your store money or your advice. We're grown. We've got this." The words cut sharper than any blade. My store money? That petty trade had fed him, clothed him, and carried him through college. And now, with a $500 million dream in his grasp, he dismissed me like an unwanted guest. I stayed calm, my tone even. "Jackson, do you remember whose name is on that ticket?" A pause. "It's not like that," he murmured. But it was exactly like that. The next day, Ruth arrived at my door with a cold smirk. "You've had your time, Grace. Step aside. We don't need you now." She didn't even wait for a reply before turning on her heel. I stood on my porch, my hands shaking, not with fear, but with the thrill of an old, familiar resolve. I'd been underestimated before. Jude had underestimated me when he vanished. Landlords had underestimated me when I scraped together rent from nickels and dimes. Ruth was about to learn what that underestimation cost. I called my lawyer again. We reviewed every detail, the ticket's purchase slip, the signed receipt, even the surveillance footage from the gas station where I'd bought it. The evidence was ironclad. Without me, Ruth and Jackson couldn't legally claim a cent. But I didn't want just legality. I wanted them to feel the ground shift beneath them. That week, I began to withdraw. I stopped calling. I stopped visiting. I let Ruth believe she'd won. And while they celebrated, I built my plan, step by careful step. By mid-June, the media had grown impatient. Speculation swirled about the silent winner who hadn't yet stepped forward. Reporters camped outside lottery headquarters. On social media, conspiracy theories ran wild. The winner lost the ticket. The winner is negotiating in secret. The winner doesn't exist. Ruth panicked. She pushed Jackson harder. "We need to claim it now. The longer we wait, the greater the risk." Jackson faltered. "But Mom. She's irrelevant." Ruth snapped. "We can handle this." But Ruth didn't know about the third-party clause, the requirement for the ticket holder's signature. She didn't know that every silent day was my choice, not theirs. I visited the stall that Saturday, acting as if nothing had changed. Regular customers greeted me warmly. The news played on a small radio in the background, still no word from the Essex County Powerball winner. I smiled to myself. Sometimes, the sweetest revenge is patience. The cracks are now canyons. What would you do in Grace's shoes? Subscribe, like, and comment to share your thoughts. This storm is far from over. It was July when the betrayal went public. I was restocking shirts at the store when my phone buzzed with a video notification. A friend had sent a clip of Ruth on a local news interview. She stood outside a luxury car dealership, her hair perfectly styled, her voice dripping with confidence. "We're excited to start a new life," she told the reporter. "We're relocating soon, California, maybe Napa. We've got big plans. Family isn't really part of it." The reporter pressed her. "Family?" Ruth laughed. "Let's just say some people served their purpose." The words hit me like a slap. Within hours, the clip went viral. Neighbors whispered. Church friends called to ask if I'd seen it. I watched Jackson in the background of the video, his hands shoved in his pockets, his expression conflicted but silent. That evening, he called me, his voice small. "Mom, she didn't mean it like that." "She meant every word," I replied quietly. The next day, the betrayal deepened. I arrived home to find a formal letter taped to my door. It was from a lawyer representing Ruth and Jackson, urging me to transfer all rights and claims regarding the lottery winnings to the marital household. The arrogance was breathtaking. I sat at my kitchen table, the letter trembling in my hands. Then I began to laugh, not the laughter of amusement, but the sharp, bitter kind that comes when pain turns to steel. Instead of calling them, I called my lawyer. "Let's make this official," I said. He chuckled knowingly. "I was hoping you'd say that." Within days, we prepared documentation proving my sole ownership of the ticket. We even drafted a press statement, just in case Ruth's greed pushed her to escalate. Meanwhile, Ruth doubled down. She hosted a lavish party at a Montclair rooftop bar, boasting about her future fortune. Photos flooded Instagram, Ruth in designer gowns, Jackson with a strained smile, captions like "to the future Napa royalty." But I noticed something in Jackson's eyes in those photos: regret. The boy I raised was still in there somewhere, buried beneath Ruth's manipulations. A week later, Ruth sent another message through her lawyer: "Sign or face a public dispute." She thought the threat of embarrassment would scare me. She didn't know embarrassment was a luxury I'd stopped fearing decades ago. Betrayal cuts deepest when it's public. What would your next move be? Subscribe, like, and comment. The reckoning is coming. By late summer, tension wrapped around Newark like a heavy fog. Ruth's arrogance had grown unbearable. She strutted through town, dropping hints about her future millions, while the media speculated daily about the mysterious winner. But I wasn't idle. I'd begun reaching out quietly, to reporters, to old friends, to anyone who could amplify my side of the story when the time came. I didn't want to humiliate Jackson publicly unless I had to, but I wouldn't let Ruth destroy everything I'd built. One evening, I visited the church after closing my stall. The sanctuary was empty except for Pastor Elaine, who was arranging hymnals. I sat beside her and finally unburdened my secret. She listened patiently, then said, "Grace, revenge can be sweet, but justice is sweeter. Wait for your moment, it will come." Her words steadied me. Meanwhile, Ruth was unraveling. She'd begun pressuring Jackson relentlessly. "She's old, Jackson. She doesn't need that money. We do. Think of the life we could have." Jackson's voice cracked one night, according to a mutual friend who overheard their fight through thin apartment walls. "She's my mother, Ruth. She sacrificed everything for me." But Ruth's greed was louder than his loyalty. The breaking point came on a sweltering August afternoon. Ruth and Jackson appeared on a talk show, claiming, without naming names, that an obstinate relative was holding their future hostage. The host chuckled, and the audience gasped. The implication was clear. That evening, I stood in my small kitchen, holding the ticket. The edges were worn now, the ink slightly faded. But its power hadn't dimmed. I thought of the years I'd spent scraping by, the nights I'd gone without dinner so Jackson could eat, the humiliation of begging for credit at the grocery store. This wasn't just money. It was the universe's way of balancing the scales. The next morning, I called my lawyer. "It's time," I said. He knew what I meant. We began drafting a strategy, a way to claim the jackpot publicly, with maximum impact. And maybe, just maybe, a way to teach Ruth that greed always devours itself. The storm is about to break wide open. What do you think Grace's public reveal will look like? Subscribe, like, and comment. You won't want to miss the fireworks. The first hint of autumn colored the maples outside my kitchen window when I finalized my plan. The Powerball's claim deadline loomed, and Ruth's arrogance had reached new heights. She'd posted a photo of herself with a glass of champagne, captioned, "Manifesting millions, our time is now." She had no idea her time was running out. I spent the next few days quietly preparing. My lawyer secured an appointment with lottery officials. My trusted friend from the news station cleared her schedule. I gathered every receipt, photo, and witness who could confirm the ticket was mine. Ruth, oblivious, hosted another dinner party. She and Jackson smiled for Instagram selfies beneath twinkling lights, their friends raising toasts to future billionaires. But their laughter didn't hide the cracks. Jackson looked pale, his smile strained. The next morning, I passed him on the street. He avoided my eyes but slowed his pace. "Mom," he said softly, "Ruth says you're dragging this out to punish us." I looked at him for a long moment. dragging this out?" I asked. "I carried you on my back when no one else would. If I were punishing you, Jackson, you'd already know." He flinched but said nothing. That afternoon, Ruth sent me a final text. "If you think you can hold us hostage, you're mistaken. We don't need you anymore. Sign or step aside." I didn't reply. My silence was louder than any retort. 2 days later, the local paper ran another story. "Mystery winner still missing, Essex County buzzes with speculation." Ruth reposted it with laughing emojis, telling her friends the old bat was afraid to go public. But I wasn't afraid. I was patient. On Sunday, I attended church as usual. Pastor Elaine preached about David and Goliath, about small stones and impossible odds. As the choir sang, I slipped my hand into my Bible and touched the ticket. Its edges were frayed now, but its power was intact. After the service, a few church ladies gathered around me, gossiping quietly. "We know you're strong, Grace," one whispered. "Don't let them break you." I smiled faintly. They've already broken themselves. That night, I called my lawyer. "Tomorrow," I said. "We're going public." He exhaled in relief. "I'll make the calls." Meanwhile, Ruth bragged to her inner circle that the ticket would be claimed any day now, as if she were the one holding it. Her delusion was staggering. But greed blinds people to the ground crumbling beneath their feet. As I prepared for the next day, I laid out my best dress, the navy one I'd worn to Jackson's college graduation. I polished my shoes until they gleamed. I wanted the world to see me not as a victim but as a victor. Before bed, I looked at a faded photo of Jackson as a boy, grinning with missing teeth. My heart ached. This wasn't just revenge, it was heartbreak. But sometimes, heartbreak had to blaze before healing could begin. The world would know the truth soon enough. The pieces are in place. How will Grace's reveal unfold? Subscribe, like, and comment. The next chapter changes everything. Monday morning dawned bright and clear, the kind of day that feels like it's waiting for history to happen. I stood outside the lottery headquarters in Trenton, clutching my Bible and the winning ticket inside it. My lawyer walked beside me, his briefcase swinging lightly. Reporters clustered near the entrance, their cameras ready. They didn't know yet that the story they'd been chasing for months was about to break wide open. As we approached the doors, a familiar voice rang out. "Grace." I turned to see Jackson and Ruth striding across the parking lot. Ruth wore a tailored white suit and oversized sunglasses, the very picture of entitlement. Jackson trailed behind, his face pale. "You weren't supposed to come today," Ruth hissed. "We had a plan." I raised an eyebrow. "We?" "You can't do this," she snapped. "Jackson and I, this is our future." "This ticket," I said calmly, lifting the Bible just enough for the cameras to catch, "has my name on it. You two wouldn't have a future without me." The reporters caught the exchange instantly. Microphones thrust forward. Cameras flashed. Ruth's carefully crafted image began to unravel. Inside, the lottery official greeted us warmly. We presented every piece of documentation, receipts, ID, even the gas station surveillance clip. It was ironclad. The official confirmed what Ruth feared. The winnings legally belonged to me. When we stepped outside, the press swarmed. One reporter shouted, "Grace, how does it feel to win $500 million?" I paused, looked straight into the nearest camera, and said, "It feels like a reminder, never underestimate the woman who raised you." The clip aired within hours. By evening, it dominated national news. Social media exploded with praise, sympathy, and schadenfreude. Memes appeared, Ruth's shocked face beside captions like "plot twist of the year." Ruth tried to save face, posting a vague statement about family misunderstandings. But the damage was done. She was a villain now, a cautionary tale. Jackson called me late that night. His voice trembled. "Mom, I'm so sorry." I swallowed hard. "I know you are. But sorry doesn't fix everything." "I was weak," he admitted. "I let her convince me you didn't matter." "You mattered to me," I said quietly. "Even when it cost me everything." For the first time in months, the silence between us wasn't hostile, it was heavy with regret. The next day, offers flooded in, financial advisors, charities, talk shows. I ignored most of them. The money was secondary now. This was about reclaiming my dignity and reminding Jackson who had stood by him when the world didn't care. At church the following Sunday, the congregation erupted in applause when I walked in. Pastor Elaine hugged me tightly. "You handled it with grace," she said, smiling at the pun. But even in triumph, my heart ached for the boy I'd raised. Jackson was a grown man, but I could see the child who once clung to my skirt, terrified of thunderstorms. As for Ruth, she disappeared from social media for a while. Mutual friends whispered that she was scrambling to salvage her reputation. Some said she was meeting with divorce attorneys. Others claimed she was plotting revenge. But I wasn't afraid. She'd already lost the war, she just didn't know how to admit defeat. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, tickets safely locked away, and whispered a prayer of thanks. This wasn't the end. It was just the turning point. The real healing, and maybe more storms, was still ahead. Grace has claimed her victory, but the aftermath will be messy. What fallout do you predict? Subscribe, like, and comment. The next chapters reveal the consequences. The days following the revelation felt surreal. Strangers approached me at my store, shaking my hand, some even crying. "You give hope to every mother out there," one woman said. The praise was humbling, but it also magnified the ache in my chest. This wasn't a fairy tale, it was a battlefield, and the scars were fresh. Jackson stopped by my house 2 days after the reveal. He looked thinner, his eyes shadowed. "Mom, I don't know where to start," he said quietly. "Start with honesty," I replied. He sat at the table, staring at his hands. "Ruth's furious. She says you humiliated her." "She humiliated herself," I said flatly. Jackson flinched. I thought she loved me." "She loved the idea of wealth," I said. "And she thought she could erase me." He rubbed his temples. "I was weak." "Yes," I agreed. "But weakness can be mended if you choose differently now." Meanwhile, Ruth wasn't retreating quietly. Rumors swirled. She'd been spotted in Manhattan, consulting a high-profile attorney. A friend from Montclair messaged me, "She's talking lawsuits, Grace, she's desperate." I smiled at the message. Desperation was a dangerous fuel. The media attention continued, but I declined interviews. My lawyer advised me to stay quiet and let the public's fascination fade. Instead, I poured my energy into practical matters, meeting financial planners, securing the winnings, and quietly donating to the church food bank under an alias. But late one night, as the city settled into silence, I received a text from an unknown number. "You won't keep it all. Watch your back." I stared at the screen, my heartbeat quickening. It had Ruth's venom all over it. But I didn't respond. Silence had become my sharpest weapon. The next Sunday, Jackson joined me at church. He didn't sit beside me, he lingered in the back, but I saw his eyes glisten as Pastor Elaine spoke about forgiveness. Afterward, he approached hesitantly. "Can I help you at the store this week?" I nodded. It was a start. Ruth, however, wasn't finished. That week, gossip blogs lit up. Anonymous tips suggested I'd stolen the ticket. Photos of me with Jackson at my stall surfaced, twisted into false narratives. But for every lie Ruth spread, there were 10 voices defending me. The community I'd served for decades refused to let her rewrite the truth. At night, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the ticket framed on my wall. The war wasn't over, but I'd already won the battle that mattered most, my dignity. The aftershocks are rippling. What do you think Ruth's next desperate move will be? Subscribe, like, and comment with your predictions. Ruth's next move came like a storm. 2 weeks after my public claim, I was leaving the store when a sleek black car pulled up. Ruth stepped out, sunglasses hiding her eyes, her hair immaculate as always. She didn't wait for pleasantries. "You think you've won," she said coldly. "But this isn't over." I leaned against the doorframe, unimpressed. "You've already lost, Ruth." She sneered. "I made Jackson who he is. I kept him focused, pushed him to succeed. You're just a petty trader." I met her gaze evenly. That petty trader raised him when his father vanished. That petty trader fed him, clothed him, and prayed for him. You don't get to erase that. She stepped closer, her voice low. "I'll find a way to take what's mine." I didn't flinch. "It was never yours." The encounter rattled me, but I refused to show fear. That evening, I called my lawyer to prepare for any legal tricks she might try. He reassured me, "Grace, she has no claim. The ticket is indisputably yours." But Ruth wasn't relying on the law. She began planting stories in tabloids, alleging elder abuse, manipulation, even fraud. A fake Instagram account posted doctored screenshots of messages, suggesting I'd coerced Jackson into giving me the ticket. The lies were ugly, but they didn't stick. Too many people knew the truth. Jackson distanced himself from her quietly. Friends spotted him at a diner alone, his wedding ring gone. When he finally called me, his voice was weary. "I'm filing for divorce," he said. I closed my eyes. "I'm sorry, Jackson. I should have seen her for what she was," he whispered. "You loved her," I said gently. "That's not a crime. But loving someone doesn't mean surrendering your soul." In the following weeks, Ruth's public image crumbled. Invitations dried up. Friends ghosted her. She was spotted arguing with her attorney outside a courthouse, her once flawless hair disheveled. The final blow came when a recording leaked, Ruth, drunk at a party, admitting she'd planned to divorce Jackson after securing the winnings. The clip went viral. Public sympathy shifted entirely to me and Jackson. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Ruth had built her own downfall, brick by brick. One evening, Jackson came by the house. We sat on the porch, the air cool with early autumn. "Mom," he said, "I don't deserve your forgiveness." I reached for his hand. Forgiveness isn't about deserving. It's about freeing yourself. We sat in silence for a while, the cicadas buzzing like a chorus of second chances. Ruth's world is collapsing, but is her desperation dangerous? Subscribe, like, and comment. The finale is near. Winter settled over Newark, crisp and clear. The frenzy had faded. The media had moved on to the next sensation. My life was quieter now, but not unchanged. Jackson finalized his divorce, and Ruth vanished from public view. Rumor had it she'd left the state, chasing another wealthy prospect. But for me, her absence wasn't relief, it was closure. With the winnings secured, I invested carefully. I bought a modest home in a peaceful neighborhood, upgraded the store into a small boutique, and funded scholarships for single mothers. I wanted the money to mean something beyond revenge. Jackson returned to his roots. He began volunteering at the church food bank, rediscovering the values I'd raised him with. Our relationship, though scarred, began to heal. He even laughed again, the same boyish laugh I hadn't heard since before Ruth's poison seeped in. One snowy evening, as we decorated my new living room for Christmas, Jackson paused beside the framed ticket on the mantel. "Mom," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I almost lost you over this." "You almost lost yourself," I replied softly. He nodded, tears glinting in his eyes. "Thank you for not giving up on me." I smiled faintly. "Thank you for finding your way back." That night, I sat by the fire, watching the snow fall outside. I thought of Jude, of the years of scraping by, of the humiliation I'd endured. And I thought of Ruth, the woman who'd underestimated me, who'd thought money could replace loyalty. Revenge had been sweet, but what I felt now was something deeper. It wasn't just triumph, it was peace. Weeks later, I returned to the church, not for service but to place a quiet envelope in the offering box. Inside was a note, "For every mother who's ever been cast aside, may she find her strength." As I stepped outside, the winter sun broke through the clouds, spilling light across the snow. For the first time in years, the world felt wide open. The jackpot had changed my life, but not in the way Ruth imagined. Money hadn't saved me, resilience had. And resilience, I realized, was a kind of wealth no one could steal. And that's the end of Grace's journey, from betrayal to justice to peace. What did you think of her revenge and redemption? Subscribe, like, and comment if you were gripped by every twist. Your support helps bring more powerful stories like this to life.